You give endlessly. You feel deeply. You sense the unspoken pain in a room before anyone speaks. And yet, somehow, you keep attracting people who drain you like an emotional battery. The pattern is hauntingly familiar. It starts with connection. Someone sees you, really sees you. They're drawn to your light, your understanding, your endless capacity to listen. They tell you things they've never told anyone else. You feel special, needed, validated in your gift of understanding. But slowly, imperceptibly, the exchange becomes uneven. Their problems multiply. Their needs intensify. Your advice goes unheeded, yet they return for more comfort. Your boundaries, if you dare to set any, are dismissed as selfishness, and one day, you find yourself empty, exhausted, questioning your sanity, wondering why you always end up here, giving until there's nothing left, while they take without reciprocation that you're not crazy. You're empathic. And Carl Jung warned us nearly a century ago. Empathy without boundaries isn't virtue. It's vulnerability, and predators know it. The Swiss psychiatrist understood something fundamental about human connection that we're only now beginning to articulate in modern psychological terms. Not everyone approaches relationships with the same internal landscape. Some seek genuine exchange. Others seek to extract without return. Your kindness is a lighthouse on a stormy shore, visible for miles, offering safety and direction. But not all ships seeking harbor are lost. Some are pirates, searching for treasure they cannot generate themselves. What if your greatest strength, your capacity to feel, understand, and connect, is also your greatest risk? What if the very quality that makes you human is also the one making you prey? Before we dive deeper, let's clarify what we mean by empathy. It's perhaps the most misunderstood human capacity, often confused with its cousins, sympathy and compassion. Empathy is feeling with others, neurologically mirroring their emotional state as if it were your own. When someone cries, your eyes water. When they're anxious, your heart races too. This is different from sympathy, which is feeling for others while maintaining emotional distance. And it's certainly different from codependency, which is losing yourself entirely to fix others. Modern neuroscience has identified specific brain structures responsible for this mirroring. The discovery of mirror neurons in the 1990s illuminated what Jung intuited decades earlier. Some humans are wired to resonate more deeply with others' emotional states. Research on highly sensitive persons, HSPs, suggests about 20% of the population processes sensory and emotional information more deeply than others. Our society has a complex relationship with empathy. We glorify selfless givers, especially women, caregivers, healers, teachers, and nurturers, while simultaneously dismissing their inevitable depletion as weakness. Just set better boundaries, we're told, without acknowledgement that the very neural wiring that makes someone empathic often makes traditional boundary setting feel like violence. Jung would recognize this as an example of enantiodromia, his term for when a virtue, pushed to extreme, transforms into its opposite. Empathy, unchecked, becomes self-destruction. Generosity becomes depletion. Understanding others becomes losing yourself. Think of empathy as an open door. It's necessary for authentic human connection. Without it, we remain isolated in our own experience, unable to truly know another's world. But a door that cannot close is not a door at all. It's a vulnerability in the architecture of self, a perpetual opening through which anything or anyone may enter without restriction. You wouldn't leave your front door open 24/7. Why do you leave your emotional door unguarded? This is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. It's about understanding that your empathic gift requires protection precisely because of its value, both to you and to those who would exploit it. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, Jung wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. This enigmatic statement contains the essence of his warning to empathic souls. Jung understood that humans don't just connect through their conscious personalities, but through a complex dance of unconscious elements, particularly through what he termed the shadow. The shadow contains everything we've disowned in ourselves: our aggression, selfishness, manipulation, rage, and yes, our predatory aspects. When we refuse to acknowledge these elements within, we become blind to them without. This creates the perfect conditions for projection, the unconscious mechanism where we cast our disowned qualities onto others. Here's where empaths become particularly vulnerable. Those who have disowned their own darkness often cannot recognize darkness in others. Having rejected your own capacity for manipulation, you may fail to see it approaching. Having denied your own predatory instincts, you remain naive to those who hunt. Jung describes certain personalities as psychic vampires, individuals who, often unconsciously, feed off the emotional energy of others. These people aren't necessarily malevolent in intent. They're often wounded themselves, seeking to fill an internal void. But the result is the same. They leave others depleted while temporarily filling their own emptiness. This creates a particularly dangerous dynamic for those Jung would recognize as wounded healers, empaths who, through their own early trauma, developed heightened sensitivity to others' emotional needs. Your early wounds taught you to scan environments for emotional cues, to prioritize others' comfort over your own, to derive identity from being helpful. These adaptive childhood strategies become maladaptive adult patterns that predatory personalities can easily exploit. In his private letters, Jung warned about the danger of unguarded goodness. He understood that the psyche seeks equilibrium, not morality. When you carry excess empathy, the unconscious doesn't judge whether the person who comes to balance the equation has good intentions. It simply responds to the energetic opportunity. Where there is light, Jung noted, there is shadow. The brighter your empathic light shines, the more shadow figures it attracts. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you represent something they lack: emotional depth, conscience, authentic feeling, spiritual connection. The unconscious doesn't judge morality. It seeks balance, and predators restore balance by draining excess empathy. Your unguarded heart is not just a gift to the world. It's an invitation to those who would consume rather than reciprocate. Who are these predators Jung warned about? They exist on a spectrum, from the malignantly narcissistic to the simply unconscious energy drainers. They include narcissists, sociopaths, covert emotional abusers, energy vampires, and even those practicing spiritual bypassing who use enlightened language to avoid accountability. What unites them is a pattern of taking without reciprocity, consuming without contribution, and exploiting emotional labor without acknowledgement or return. Their hunting strategies follow predictable patterns that Jung would recognize as archetypal. First comes love bombing, the overwhelming attention, admiration, and affinity that feels like soul recognition. No one has ever understood me like you do, they say, and it feels true. This creates rapid intimacy and bypasses normal relationship development. For empaths, starved for deep connection in a superficial world, this feels like coming home. What you don't realize is that this intensity is setting the stage for trauma bonding, the powerful biochemical attachment that forms through intermittent reinforcement and emotional intensity. Next, they play the victim, activating your rescuer complex. Their stories feature them as perpetually misunderstood, mistreated, and maligned by others who just couldn't handle their authentic self. Coincidentally, all their exes are crazy, all their former friends betray them, all their family members toxic. Jung would immediately recognize this as projection. They attribute to others the very behaviors they exhibit. The predator then employs gaslighting to erode your reality testing. That's not what happened. They insist when you recall their hurtful behavior. You're too sensitive, they say when you express pain. You're imagining things, they declare when you notice patterns. This cognitive dissonance creates a fog where you no longer trust your perceptions, making you increasingly dependent on their reality. Future faking sustains hope despite mounting evidence of exploitation. They dangle promises of what will come once things settle down or after this crisis passes, the reciprocity, respect, and balance you crave always positioned just beyond the horizon, never materializing in the present. Finally, they establish intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive reward pattern known to behavioral psychology. They alternate warmth with coldness, presence with disappearance, validation with devaluation. This unpredictability keeps you biochemically addicted to the relationship, constantly working to recapture the connection shown during the love bombing phase. From a Jungian perspective, these predators are drawn to empaths because empaths carry what the predator lacks: authentic emotional depth, conscience, compassion, and spiritual connection. The predator temporarily feels whole by associating with you. They wear your goodness like a borrowed garment, often appearing quite admirable in public contexts while reserving their exploitation for private. Consider Anna, a therapist who found herself emotionally hostage to a client who subtly threatened self-harm whenever she attempted to establish session boundaries. Or Michael, whose elderly mother weaponized guilt whenever he prioritized his own family. Or Sophia, whose boss praised her team spirit while piling on responsibilities beyond her job description without compensation. None of these empathic people were stupid. They were unconscious, unaware of the shadow dynamics playing out beneath the surface of these interactions. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to see clearly. The price of unguarded empathy goes beyond momentary discomfort. It manifests as a constellation of symptoms that signal what Jung called loss of soul. When one gives too much of their psychic essence away, you recognize yourself in any of these symptoms. Chronic fatigue that persists despite adequate sleep. Anxiety that seems to have no specific cause. A growing sense of identity confusion. Who are you beyond your relationships and roles? Physical manifestations like autoimmune flares, digestive issues, or frequent infections as your body protests what your mind permits. Depression that feels less like sadness and more like emptiness, a void where your vitality once lived. Jung understood that psychological depletion manifests physically. Modern trauma research confirms this through studies of the nervous system. When you consistently override your own needs to attend to others, your body keeps score, producing excess cortisol, disrupting your hormonal balance, creating inflammation, and dysregulating your autonomic functions. The most insidious cost is the betrayal of self. You said yes so many times to others that you forgot you had the right to say no to yourself. Each boundary violation you accepted normalized the next. Each time you silenced your inner warning system, it grew quieter. Each sacrifice praised by others reinforced the notion that your value lies in your utility, not your being. This creates what Jung would call a complex, a cluster of emotionally charged associations that drives unconscious behavior. Your empathic complex compels you to respond to others' needs even at your own expense. It becomes so automatic that it feels like your identity rather than a pattern you can modify. The most dangerous prison, Jung might say today, is the one you don't realize you're in, built with bricks of I should help and mortared with selfish as the ultimate condemnation. Your body tries to tell you. Those mysterious illnesses that flare after intense interactions. The fatigue that descends when certain people call. The subtle tightening in your chest when specific names appear on your phone. These are not random. They are wisdom, your organism's desperate attempt to communicate what your conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. What empaths rarely consider is that their unexamined helping behavior might actually enable dysfunction rather than heal it. When you consistently absorb others' emotional responsibilities, you deny them the growth that comes from facing consequences. Your endless understanding becomes the cushion that prevents necessary change. The ultimate cost? You become a stranger to yourself, orbiting others' needs while your own soul starves in plain sight. Jung would not advise you to abandon your empathic nature. Quite the opposite. He would invite you to develop what we might call conscious empathy, feeling with discernment, compassion with boundaries, connection with sovereignty. The first step is what I call the Jungian pause, a moment of conscious reflection before responding to others' emotional needs. In this pause, ask yourself, is this interaction serving my soul or depleting it? Am I moving toward wholeness or fragmentation? Am I responding from clarity or compulsion? This pause disrupts the automatic caretaking response that bypasses your discernment. It creates space for choice where previously there was only conditioned reaction. That Jung's technique of active imagination offers another powerful intervention. Dialogue with your inner predator, the part of you capable of prioritizing self-interest and setting firm boundaries. Ask this figure, what do you see that I'm missing? Where am I vulnerable? What would you do differently? This isn't about becoming predatory. It's about integrating the protective wisdom this disowned part carries. Jung spoke often about holding the tension of opposites, the capacity to contain seemingly contradictory truths without collapsing into either extreme. For empaths, this means holding the tension between connection and separation, between giving and receiving, between compassion and protection. You can be kind without being available. You can love without being owned. You can understand without accepting mistreatment. Consider adopting what I call the empath's Bill of Rights, a set of permissions based on Jungian principles. I have the right to protect my energy without explanation or apology, that I have the right to say no without offering alternatives, that I have the right to withdraw from toxicity without fixing it first. I have the right to prioritize my wholeness above others' comfort, that I have the right to change the rules that no longer serve my evolution. These aren't selfish declarations. They're prerequisites for authentic giving. Without them, what you offer others isn't freely given. It's extracted through unconscious compulsion, that in alchemical terms, a symbolic language Jung often employed. This transformation represents turning leaden sacrifice into golden selfhood. Lead is heavy, dull, poisonous in excess. Gold is valuable, radiant, and maintains its integrity regardless of its surroundings. Your empathy, too, can transform from a heavy burden into your most precious asset when you learn to value it as others do. The antidote is not becoming less empathic. It's becoming more conscious about how, when, where, and with whom you share this gift. Now we venture into the heart of Jung's approach, shadow work. This is not abstract theory, but practical psychological integration that transforms empathic vulnerability into empathic power. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the person who has most depleted you, the one who took without return, who used your understanding against you, who left you empty. See their face clearly. Now, imagine that this predatory energy also lives within you as a disowned part of your psyche. This doesn't mean you're secretly manipulative or exploitative. It means that the capacity to prioritize yourself, to take up space unapologetically, to want without shame, to protect your interests fiercely, these natural human qualities have been banished from your conscious identity and now must be reclaimed. Ask this inner figure, what do you try to teach me? What power do you hold that I've been afraid to claim? How will my life change if I integrated your strength? Take out your journal and respond to these inquiries. Where did I abandon myself to please others? Identify 3 specific instances where you overrode your internal warning system to maintain connection. What part of me enjoys being needed? Why? Examine the secondary gains of your empathic depletion: recognition, purpose, moral superiority, avoidance of your own pain. What boundary, if set, would have changed everything? Imagine the single limit that, had you enforced it consistently, would have most transformed your most depleting relationship. Jung would call this process reclaiming projections. The predator you keep encountering externally mirrors the disowned predator within. Not the part of you that would harm others, but the part that would protect you with the same ferocity you protect everyone else. The part that would say enough before you're depleted. The part that would evaluate others' worthiness to receive your empathic gifts, to be warned against spiritual bypassing here. Shadow work isn't primarily about forgiveness. It's about sovereignty, reclaiming the parts of yourself you've disowned and integrating them into conscious choice. Forgiveness may naturally arise from this integration, but it's not the goal. Wholeness is, remember Jung's insight. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Your consistent attraction to those who exploit your empathy reveals not your weakness, but your unfinished inner work. Having confronted your shadow and recognized the patterns that made you vulnerable, it's time to rebuild your relationship with your empathic gift. This requires daily practices that Jung might call psychological hygiene, regular maintenance of your newly conscious boundaries. Begin each morning with intention setting. Before checking messages or responding to others' needs, declare, "Today, I serve from fullness, not emptiness. I give from abundance, not scarcity. My primary relationship is with my own soul." Practice energy shielding visualization. Imagine yourself surrounded by a permeable golden egg of light. This barrier doesn't block connection, it filters it. It allows genuine exchange while repelling extraction. Picture this shield when entering draining environments or interactions. Conduct a weekly empathy audit. Sunday evenings, review your interactions. Who left you feeling energized? Who depleted you? What patterns do you notice? This conscious tracking builds discernment that eventually becomes instinctive. Adopt the phrase, "Let me think about it," as your new default response to requests. This creates space between stimulus and response, the foundation of freedom. No longer automatic in your yes, you become deliberate in your generosity. Schedule non-negotiable solitude, sacred time when your empathic receptors can reset. For many empaths, nature provides the perfect setting for this restoration, as it demands nothing from your emotional resources while replenishing your energetic reserves. Develop what I call the Jungian gatekeeper, an inner figure whose sole purpose is to guard your thresholds. Before allowing someone deeper access to your emotional resources, this aspect evaluates. Has this person demonstrated reciprocity? Do they respect limits? Do they take responsibility for their own emotions? Do they give as well as receive? Repeat this affirmation, especially when feeling the pull to overgive. My empathy is sacred. It is not currency. It is not infinite. It is mine to steward. These practices may initially feel selfish, especially if you've built an identity around unlimited availability. This discomfort signals growth, the necessary recalibration of an imbalanced system. Just as physical therapy causes muscle soreness, psychological sovereignty creates identity friction. Both indicate healing in progress. Jung would remind you that individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole, requires differentiation. You must distinguish between yourself and others to form authentic connection. Without this boundary of selfhood, you don't actually have relationships. You have psychological mergers that ultimately serve neither party. Your rebuilt empathic capacity will be more discerning, more powerful, and paradoxically, more genuinely helpful to others than your previous boundaryless absorption ever was. Jung was fascinated by alchemy, not for its literal attempt to transform lead into gold, but for its rich metaphorical representation of psychological transformation. Your journey from exploited empath to sovereign soul follows the same alchemical stages: calcination, burning away illusions; dissolution, emotional release; separation, establishing boundaries; conjunction, integrating opposites; and finally, coagulation, embodying new wisdom. Like Persephone in Greek mythology, you were taken into the underworld, not because you were weak, but because you were beautiful, vibrant, alive. And like her, you need not remain a victim in your narrative. Having eaten the pomegranate seeds of awareness, you now rightfully rule both realms, the light world of connection and the shadow world of discernment. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, Jung acknowledged. The awakening we've explored isn't comfortable. Recognizing how your greatest gift made you vulnerable requires facing difficult truths. Yet this recognition transforms the very nature of your empathy from unconscious liability to conscious power. You weren't chosen because you're weak. You were targeted because you're powerful and unaware of it. Predatory personalities sensed what you didn't, that you carry something valuable, something they lack, something they crave, but cannot generate within themselves. This reframing doesn't excuse exploitation, but it repositions you from passive victim to active participant in your ongoing evolution. The wound becomes initiation. The exploitation becomes education. Nothing is wasted when it's transformed into wisdom. Post-traumatic growth research confirms what Jung intuited, that suffering, when consciously processed, creates capacity that comfort cannot build. Your experiences have given you greater discernment, deeper intuition, authentic boundaries, and most importantly, the wisdom to value yourself as highly as you value others. The scar is not a flaw. It's a map of where the light entered and where you learn to guard it. It marks not weakness, but initiation into a more complete humanity, one that honors both connection and protection as sacred aspects of wholeness. As we conclude this exploration of Jung's warning to empathic souls, let's clarify the most crucial point. Your empathy is not the problem. Your unawareness is. Predators don't hate your empathy. They don't wish you were colder, harder, less understanding. Quite the opposite. They're drawn to precisely these qualities. What they exploit is not your compassion, but your lack of boundaries around it. Not your sensitivity, but your unconsciousness about its value. You don't need to shut down your heart. You don't need to become cynical, detached, or cold. You need to armor your spirit to create protection worthy of the treasure you carry. Jung's psychology always aimed at wholeness, not perfection. The goal isn't to eliminate vulnerability, but to make it conscious. To choose connection from wisdom rather than compulsion. To give from discernment rather than habit. Remember, your empathy is not just a personal trait. It's a collective resource in a world desperate for genuine connection. By protecting it, you preserve its power. By valuing it, you ensure its availability for those worthy of its gift. I invite you to continue this journey. Download the Empath Sovereignty Checklist, linked in the description below. Join our Shadow Integration Circle community where we practice these principles together. And leave a comment declaring, I am no longer prey. I am protector of my light. As Jung wrote, who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. You've begun the awakening. Your empathy, now conscious, becomes not your vulnerability, but your superpower. A gift you give selectively rather than a resource others extract indiscriminately. The world needs your empathy, but only if you're still alive to give it.